A man's face, shocked, livid, betrayed, watching uniformed officers walk toward his pool where teenagers are diving. Money exchanged. The morning started like every other Saturday. Michael Torres stood on his back porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sunlight dance across the water of his pool, the one thing he'd worked 15 years to afford. He'd saved every penny, worked doubles at the hospital where he was a surgical tech, and finally, 5 years ago, broke ground on this backyard oasis. The pool was kidney-shaped, pristine, surrounded by Mexican tile that his mother had helped him select. There was a small waterfall feature, underwater lighting that turned the water brilliant turquoise at night, and a cabana with a half-bath and mini-fridge. Michael was 42, divorced, no kids of his own. The pool was his solace. His meditation. His accomplishment made tangible. The fence was tall, 6 feet of stained cedar, and the gate had a lock. Michael was careful about his space. He wasn't unfriendly, but he believed in boundaries. His best friend of 20 years, Karen, lived directly across the street. They'd met in college, stayed close through his marriage and divorce, through her marriage, her 2 kids, and her eventual split from her husband. Karen was the kind of friend who felt like family. She checked on him when he was sick. He helped her with her mortgage refinance paperwork. They had standing dinner plans every other Thursday. Karen's son, Devin, was 16. A good kid, or so Michael had thought. Quiet, respectful, always said hello when they saw each other at the mailbox. Devin had a mother who loved him intensely, maybe too intensely. Karen had a tendency to excuse his behavior, laugh off his mistakes, treat him like he was somehow exempt from real consequences. Michael had voiced his concerns before. Gently. He's a teenager, Karen had said, waving her hand. They're all moody. He'll grow out of it. But Michael had noticed things. Devin's grades slipping. Older kids hanging around the house at odd hours. His friends looking harder than your average suburban teenagers. The kind of friends who drove expensive cars and wore flashy sneakers on a high school budget. Still, it wasn't Michael's business. Devin was Karen's problem, and he respected that boundary. The Saturday morning sun was warm on his shoulders. He had the day off, a rare luxury, and he'd planned to spend it by the pool. Maybe read the paperback thriller that had been sitting on his nightstand for 2 months. Maybe just float and let his mind go quiet for the first time in weeks. He was carrying his book and a beach towel back toward the patio when he heard the gate to his fence rattle. Michael frowned. He hadn't buzzed anyone in. He always kept the gate locked. It was an electronic system, keyed to his phone and to a physical lock box with a code. He walked toward the noise, his bare feet slapping against the tile. Through the fence, he could see someone working at the lock. A boy he didn't recognize. Tall, thin, wearing a hoodie despite the heat. The boy had something, a wire, maybe, or a screwdriver, and he was working on the electronic box with surprising efficiency. Hey! Michael called out, quickening his pace. Hey, what are you doing? The boy's head snapped up. For a moment, they made eye contact, and Michael saw something flash across the teenager's face. Not fear. Defiance. Calculation. Just moving some stuff, the boy said, then turned and ran. Michael heard footsteps retreat down the street. His heart was hammering in his chest, adrenaline flooding his system. He checked the lock, miraculously, it was still secure. The boy hadn't gotten through. Still. Someone had tried to break into his yard. His sanctuary. His space. He immediately called the non-emergency police line and reported the incident. The dispatcher was professional but detached. They took his name, his address, a description of the boy, tall, thin, dark hoodie, couldn't see his face clearly. We'll increase patrols in the area, she said, which Michael knew meant nothing. He spent the rest of the morning on edge, frequently checking his phone, glancing out at the pool as if something might be disturbed. He texted Karen, "Hey, did you notice anything weird in the neighborhood today? Someone tried to break into my yard this morning. Her response came 20 minutes later, OMG. Are you okay? That's so scary. No, haven't noticed anything. Want me to come over? He told her he was fine, probably just some kids passing through. He didn't mention that the boy had seemed young, possibly around Devon's age. He didn't want to make assumptions. But he did want answers. That evening, around 6 p.m., he was inside his house getting ready to grill some chicken when his doorbell rang. It was Karen, holding a bottle of wine and looking genuinely concerned. I brought wine, she said. Figured you could use it after this morning. You look stressed as hell, Torres. She called him Torres when she was being particularly affectionate or concerned. He let her in, accepted the wine, and they settled at his kitchen counter. Karen had a way of taking up space. She was loud, physical, always gesturing, always animated. She was the opposite of Michael in almost every way, and that's why they balanced each other. Have you thought about getting a security camera? She asked, sipping wine from one of his glasses. I've thought about it. Haven't pulled the trigger yet. Do it, she said firmly. I don't like thinking about some weird teenager trying to break into your house. What if they come back? Michael nodded, filing the suggestion away. A camera. That made sense. They talked for an hour about other things, Karen's job at the dental office, a date she'd gone on that had been a disaster, some drama with her ex-husband over child support. But underneath the conversation, Michael was aware of something he couldn't quite name. Attention. Karen was laughing a little too hard at jokes that weren't quite that funny. She was checking her phone more than usual. At 9 p.m., she said she needed to get home, that she'd left Devon alone and wanted to make sure he wasn't having anyone over. At least you're thinking about it, Michael said, and he meant it lightly, but Karen's expression shifted. Tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that it's good to stay on top of that stuff. She finished her wine in one long pull. Devon's a good kid. I don't appreciate the insinuation that I'm not paying attention to my own son. I didn't insinuate anything, Michael said, but the moment had soured. She left shortly after, with a hug that felt slightly strained. He watched her cross the street to her house, wondering when his best friend had become someone who needed to defend her parenting quite so strongly. That night, Michael dreamed of shadows trying to slip through his fence, of locks that wouldn't hold, of his pool turning dark and murky. He woke at 3 a.m., throat dry, and couldn't fall back asleep. By Monday morning, the attempted break-in had faded from the front of his mind, filed away in the category of neighborhood weirdness that you had to accept as part of living in the suburbs. He went back to work at the hospital, scrubbing into surgeries, falling into the rhythm of his job. His hands were steady. His mind was focused on vascular systems and surgical corrections, on patients whose bodies he could help heal. It was easier than thinking about his best friend's defensiveness or the way she'd looked at him when he'd suggested paying attention to her son. 3 days passed. Nothing else happened at the house. On Friday evening, Michael finished his shift at 6 p.m. and drove home through traffic, radio playing something he wasn't really listening to. He pulled into his driveway, grabbed his work bag, and walked toward his front door, routine, unremarkable, the same as any other Friday. It was only when he got close to the back door that he noticed it. The gate to his pool was not locked. His key fob was on his person. He hadn't opened it. The electronic lock was showing as disengaged, which shouldn't have been possible. Michael's stomach did a slow, sick flip. He punched in his code on the physical lockbox, his hands moving automatically even as his mind raced. The gate swung open. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. There were people in his pool. Not one. Multiple teenagers, he counted 6, splashing, laughing, doing cannonballs off his diving board. There were more kids sitting on his lounge chairs, on the tile surrounding the pool. Some were holding phones up, filming. There was a cooler sitting on his patio table. The mini-fridge in the cabana was standing open. His heart began to hammer. Rage, pure and hot, flooded through him. "Hui," he shouted. "Hey! Get out of my pool!" The teenagers froze. Every head turned toward him. That's when he saw Devin. His best friend's son was standing in the shallow end of the pool, holding a clipboard. An actual clipboard. He was wearing swim trunks and an expression of utter shock at being caught, but the clipboard suggested something more complex, more organized than a random party. Devin scrambled out of the pool. Some of the other kids were already gathering their things, moving toward the gate that Michael had just opened. "Michael, Devin started, his wet hair plastered to his forehead, his face flushed. "Out," Michael said, his voice cold and quiet in a way that made several of the teenagers move faster. "Everyone. Out. Now." The exodus happened quickly. Kids grabbing phones and shoes, shuffling past him with heads down. Michael recognized one of them, Javier Rodriguez, who'd been a year behind him in high school, now working at the auto shop. Javier didn't make eye contact. Devin was the last to leave. He was still holding the clipboard. "What is that?" Michael asked, pointing. Devin looked down at it like he'd forgotten it was in his hands. He swallowed hard. "Just, notes." "Notes about what?" "Nothing. Look, Mr. Torres, we're just what? Breaking into my yard? Stealing from my pool? What is this?" Devin's jaw tightened. "We weren't stealing anything. We were just hanging out. With a clipboard." Michael snatched it from Devin's hands. What was written on it was not just, "hanging out." In neat columns, there were dates, times, and what appeared to be a pricing structure. Different tiers. Monday through Thursday, per person. Friday through Sunday, premium pricing. Weekend nights, extra fee. There were already names marked down for the following week, with check marks indicating payments received. Michael's hands went numb. "Devin," he said slowly, "what the hell is this?" The teenager's face went white. It's not what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're running an admission fee for using my pool." "We were going to stop." "You were going to stop." Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Devin, how long has this been happening?" "Just since last week." "I swear." "Last week Tuesday." Michael looked at the clipboard again. The way the entries were numbered, the casual confidence of the pricing structure, the names already booked for the coming week. Last week Tuesday meant at least a week of this. At least 6 days of strangers using his pool, his space, his sanctuary, without permission. "Get out," he said quietly. "Mr. Torres. Get out. Out of my yard. Out of my pool. Out of my house. Now." Devin grabbed his towel and left, running across the street, his wet feet slapping against the pavement. Michael stood alone in his backyard, holding the clipboard, and felt his entire world shift beneath his feet. He sat at his kitchen counter with the clipboard in front of him, reading the entries over and over, as if the words might change if he stared at them long enough. They didn't. Tuesday, June 11th, 4 visits, $20 each. Marked paid. Wednesday, June 12th, 6 visits, $20 each. Marked paid. Thursday, June 13th, 3 visits, $20 each. Marked paid. Friday, June 14th, 10 visits, $25 each. Marked paid. Saturday, June 15th, 15 visits, $30 each. Marked paid. He did the math. In 5 days, Devin had taken in $385. $385. His pool had been monetized without his knowledge. More than that, it had been infiltrated. Trespassed upon. Violently, systematically compromised. Michael had never felt violated in his own home before. Around 3 a.m., he did a walk-through of his backyard with his phone's flashlight. The mini-fridge had been rifled through, the water bottles he kept for himself had been moved, and there were a few beer cans in the trash, carefully placed at the bottom as if to hide them. There were wet footprints on his tile from kids who hadn't completely dried off. Someone had left a flip-flop by the lounge chairs. The waterfall feature wasn't quite right, it looked like someone had adjusted it, maybe to take photos. His beautiful pool. His sanctuary. Turned into a commodity. He stood in the middle of the tile deck, surrounded by the nighttime sound of crickets and distant traffic, and felt something inside him harden. At 5:30 a.m., he showered, dressed in clean scrubs, he had a shift at 6 a.m., and went to work. He didn't call Karen. Didn't text her. Didn't tell her what her son had done. The morning surgeries passed in a blur. Michael's hands did their work, steady and precise, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about trust. About boundaries. About the kind of person who would look you in the eye and act like they didn't know what they'd done wrong. At lunch, he finally called. Karen answered on the third ring, cheerful, unsuspecting. "Hey. How's your day?" "We need to talk," he said. "Okay, is everything all right?" "No. Not everything. Can you meet me after work?" "My place." There was a pause. He could feel her realizing something was wrong. "Michael, what happened? Did someone break in again?" "Just, can you come?" "Around 6. "Yeah. Yeah, of course." He hung up before she could ask more questions. The second half of his shift was harder than the first. Michael found himself less patient with the residents and staff, less focused. He caught himself snapping at a nurse who was only doing her job. At one point, he stood in the staff bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror, trying to figure out when he'd become this angry. The answer came immediately, last Friday. When he'd opened his gate and found his world being sold without his consent. He left at 4 p.m., claiming a minor migraine. His supervisor, Dr. Patel, gave him a concerned look. "You okay? You're usually not like this." "Just a bad week," Michael said, which was true, though incomplete. He got home and did something he'd been thinking about all day. He called a security company and requested an immediate installation for outdoor cameras. They could be there tomorrow. He wanted them now, but tomorrow would have to do. Then he waited. Karen arrived at 5:50 p.m. Michael watched from the window as she pulled into his driveway, watched her get out of her car with confusion etched into her face. She was wearing her work clothes, pale blue scrubs, she had similar schedules to his, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Her sneakers were worn at the heel from standing all day. He opened the door before she could knock. "Okay, you're scaring me," Karen said immediately. "What's going on? Are you sick? Did something happen? Come inside." She followed him into the kitchen. He placed the clipboard on the counter between them. For a moment, she just stared at it. "What is this?" she asked slowly. "This is how your son has been spending his time. Why don't you read it?" Karen picked up the clipboard. He watched her face as she scanned the entries, watched her expression cycle through confusion, then comprehension, then shock, then something that looked almost like anger. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Where did he get this?" "From my pool, Karen. That's what he's been doing. He's been charging teenagers to use my pool. 5 days, $385. Karen's hand shook slightly as she lowered the clipboard. She sat down heavily on one of his kitchen stools, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. "I didn't know," she finally said. "How could you not know? Your son has been running an operation. He's been breaking into my house." "Breaking in?" "Michael, he has." "I didn't give him the code, Karen. That's breaking in." He figured out how to bypass my electronic lock. Then he charged your neighbor's kid's admission to use my pool without my permission. Karen's face was pale. He wouldn't. Devin wouldn't. He did, though. He's been doing it since last Tuesday. I came home from work yesterday and found 6 kids swimming in my pool while he sat on the sidelines with this clipboard. Michael tapped it for emphasis. I don't know what he's been thinking, but he's been thinking something. Karen rubbed her temples. I'll talk to him. I'll make him apologize, and I'll replace whatever money he made. I'll pay for any damage to the pool. It's not about the money, Michael said. He realized even as he said it that it wasn't entirely true. It was somewhat about the money. It was about the violation. But it was more about something else, something about trust that had been broken. Then what is it about? Karen asked, and he heard frustration in her voice now, creeping in alongside the shock. He's a kid who made a stupid decision. A really stupid, really inappropriate decision. But it's a mistake that can be fixed. Can it? Michael pulled the clipboard back toward him. Can we fix it? Can we unuse my pool? Can we go back to before he decided that my space, my property, my one thing that I worked 15 years for, can we undo that being sold? Karen's eyes filled with tears. No. No, I'm sorry, Michael. Of course not. I didn't mean, I just meant that he's a kid, and kids make mistakes. Kids make mistakes, Michael repeated. Karen, this isn't a mistake. A mistake is accidentally breaking something. A mistake is forgetting to ask permission. This is. He trailed off, trying to find the word. This is deliberate. This is calculated. This is your son looking at my space and seeing a business opportunity. What do you want me to do? Karen asked, and now there was something different in her voice. Something almost defensive. I want you to help me understand how this happened. I want you to talk to Devin about what he was thinking. I want consequences that mean something. And I want. Michael paused. I want to know if there's anything else I should know about. Like what? Like why your son tried to break into my yard 2 weeks ago. There was an incident where someone tried to get through my gate. I reported it to the police. Was that Devin? Karen's face went even paler. You reported him to the police? I didn't report him specifically. I didn't know it was him at the time. But he could be questioned. They could. They won't, because the report was nonspecific, and frankly, they probably won't follow up. But Karen, come on. Try to break into my property, then 2 weeks later, start running a business out of my pool. That's not random. Karen stood up abruptly. He's 16. He's not thinking straight. His father left, he's struggling in school, he's old enough to know that you can't use someone else's property without permission, Michael said quietly. He's old enough to know that if his mother's best friend had some kind of accident in his own pool because it was being used unsafely, he'd be responsible for that. The implication hung in the air between them. Karen's face crumpled. You're saying that because of Devin, you'd hold him responsible if something happened? I'm saying that your son took on a risk he didn't understand. If someone had gotten hurt in my pool while he was charging admission without my knowledge, without proper safety measures, without insurance, without supervision, that's a problem. That's a big problem. He's my son, Karen whispered. I know he is. And I love you. But I'm not going to pretend this is acceptable because of that. They stood on opposite sides of the counter, the clipboard between them like a battlefield. I'll talk to him, Karen finally said. I'll make him apologize. I'll make him pay you back. I'll make him understand what he did. Good, Michael said, but even as he said it, he knew something had shifted between them. Something fundamental. A crack in the foundation that they'd built over 20 years. Karen left an hour later after more conversation, after Michael walked her through what had happened, after they both cried a little from stress and hurt and the confusion of someone you love disappointing you. She promised to have Devon come over and apologize properly. She promised to look into a therapist. Maybe Devon had bigger issues than just teenage mischief. After she was gone, Michael sat in his kitchen and realized that the violation he'd felt wasn't just about the pool. It was about being reminded that people you trusted could hurt you, even if they didn't mean to. Especially if they didn't mean to. Devon showed up at Michael's door on Saturday afternoon, with Karen hovering in the background across the street. The boy looked terrible. Red-rimmed eyes, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept. His jaw was set in that particular way of teenagers who were being forced into contrition. "I'm sorry," Devon said. His voice was flat, robotic. The words had been coached. "For what specifically?" Michael asked, leaning against the doorframe. Devon's eyes flickered. "For using your pool without permission. And for charging people to use it." "Why'd you do it?" "To make money." "For what?" Devon didn't answer immediately. Michael watched something flicker across the boy's face: hesitation, calculation, the consideration of what to share and what to hide. "Just to have money," Devon finally said. "To have my own cash." It wasn't the full answer. Michael could feel it. But he also knew that pushing would only close Devon down further, make him retreat into that teenage wall of defensive silence. "You're going to pay me back the $385, Michael said. "That's over 6 weeks of lawn work for my neighbors, or payment from your mother. Your choice." "Okay," Devon said. "And you're going to stay out of my yard. You're going to not look at my gate, you're going to not try to access my pool, you're going to pretend I don't exist if we see each other in the neighborhood. Understood?" "Yeah." It was the coldest Michael had ever been to the boy. He'd always liked Devon. Had always waved at him. Had asked about his schools and his life when their paths crossed. That was gone now. There was only the obligation between them, the obligation to be civil for Karen's sake, and nothing more. Devon left, and Michael didn't invite him back in. He watched from his window as the boy crossed the street and got into Karen's car. The following Monday, Michael had the security cameras installed. 4 of them, one covering the pool gate, one covering the back corner of his yard, one covering the perimeter fence, and one covering his driveway and front entrance. They synced to his phone. He could see everything in real time, and everything was recorded. He felt safer, but also paranoid. He found himself checking the feed frequently, looking for suspicious activity, for anything out of place. There was nothing. Just the normal rhythm of his backyard, birds, the occasional neighborhood cat, the wind moving through the palm fronds of his landscaping. By the following Friday, the incident had begun to feel somewhat resolved. Devon had started mowing yards in the neighborhood to pay back the money. Karen had called twice, both times to apologize, both times ending with them in a slightly awkward place, wanting to return to normal but unable to quite figure out how. Then, the following Saturday, Michael got a call from the police. "Is this Michael Torres?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "Who is this?" "This is Officer Sarah Chen with the police department. I'm calling regarding a report filed for Karen Mitchell. She reported her son, Devon Mitchell, as missing. He's been missing since Friday evening." Michael's stomach dropped. "Missing? What do you mean, missing?" "He left his mother's house Friday afternoon and hasn't returned. He's not answering his phone." "Has he contacted you at all?" "No." No. "When was he last seen?" "According to his mother, around 3 p.m. Friday. She was at work, she works at Riverside Dental, you know it, and when she got home around 6 p.m., he wasn't there. She thought he might be studying at a friend's house, but when she called around, no one had seen him. She filed a report this morning." "I see," Michael said, though he didn't see. None of this made sense. "Has Devon contacted you?" Or have you noticed anything suspicious at your residence? Mrs. Mitchell mentioned that Devon recently had some issues in your yard. Michael understood then. Karen had told the police about the pool incident. About the reason why Devon might want to be at Michael's house, and why Michael might notice him. No, Michael said. No suspicious activity. I don't know anything. When did you last speak to Karen? She's on the other line now, actually, talking to another officer. We're calling all the local contacts to see if anyone has information. After they hung up, Michael sat with the news for exactly 2 minutes before he got in his car and drove to Karen's house. She was standing on her porch, a police officer beside her. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her hair was still pulled back, but it was uncombed, pieces coming loose from the elastic. She was wearing the same scrubs from yesterday. Her face was blotchy with crying. Michael, she said when she saw him, and she walked into his arms. He held her because that's what you did when your best friend's child was missing. You held them. When? He asked over her shoulder. Friday after school. He said he was going to be at Marcus's house studying. I had a late shift, I didn't get home until 6:30. He never came home. He's not at Marcus's. He's not anywhere. The police officer was watching them with the particular expression that cops developed, neutral, observant, missing nothing. Michael recognized it because he worked with law enforcement occasionally at the hospital. Do you know where he might go? The officer asked. Michael thought about the pool. About the business that Devon had been running. About the kids, Javier Rodriguez and others, who had been coming to use it. About the fact that Devon, for a moment, had seemed to be in his element, organizing something, running something, being in charge. No, Michael said. I don't know. But he was thinking about those names. About that clipboard, which was still sitting on his counter at home. The next 36 hours became a blur of police activity. Devon's photo was posted on social media. The police released a statement. News vans showed up to Karen's house. It turned out that Devon was not a typical runaway, he had no history of running, no problem serious enough to prompt it. He was just a boy who had disappeared. On Sunday morning, at 6 a.m., Michael's security system sent an alert to his phone. Someone was in his backyard. Michael jolted awake, grabbed his phone, and pulled up the security feed. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break his ribs. On the screen, he could see a figure moving through his yard. Wearing dark clothes. Moving with purpose toward his pool house. Michael didn't think. He grabbed his keys, got in his car, and called 911 as he drove. I have an intruder in my yard, he told the dispatcher, giving his address. And there may be a connection to a missing person case. Missing boy, Devon Mitchell. The police are already investigating. The dispatcher kept him on the line. Stay in your vehicle. Police are 2 minutes away. Michael pulled into his driveway. From his car, he could see the gate to his yard was open. The figure was now at the pool house, the cabana where he kept his pool equipment, his maintenance chemicals, his towels. The figure was Devon. He was throwing things into a large duffel bag. He had a backpack already slung over his shoulder. He moved like someone who was packing to leave, who was running. Michael got out of his car. Devon. The boy's head snapped up. In the early morning light, Devon looked feral, desperate, panicked, nothing like the sullen teenager who'd apologized on Saturday. Stay back. Devon yelled. Come here. Just, come here. Let's talk. No. Devon grabbed the duffel bag and ran toward the back fence. Michael ran after him, his body moving on pure instinct, not thinking about the fact that Devon had essentially already broken into his house twice, was essentially already a criminal in every way that mattered. Michael caught Devon's arm just as the police vehicles pulled up to the front of his house, lights flashing, sirens wailing. Devon twisted, trying to get away, and Michael held firm. The boy was crying, actually crying, not the defensive teenage tears of someone forced to apologize, but the broken sobs of someone who was genuinely terrified. "I didn't hurt her," Devin gasped. "I didn't. I promise I didn't. I just needed to leave. I needed to get away." "Hurt who?" Michael asked. "Devin, who didn't you hurt?" "My mom. She was so mad. She was saying I was going to get us sued. She was saying she'd send me to military school. She was saying that I was nothing. That I was going to be nothing. And I couldn't." Police officers were running toward them across the lawn. Michael let go of Devin, raising his hands, stepping back. Two officers grabbed the boy, securing his wrists gently but firmly. "Don't hurt him," Devin said, his voice going high and childlike. "Please don't hurt him. He didn't do anything. He just tried to stop me." "We're not going to hurt anyone," one of the officers said. She looked at Michael. "Your place?" "Yes. He was in my cabana." The officer nodded. They read Devin his rights, just in case, Michael realized, in case charges came up later, and placed him in the back of a police cruiser. Through the window, Michael could see Devin's face, tear-stained and lost and somehow much younger than 16. An officer took Michael's statement. Devin had been on his property without permission. Devin had been breaking into his pool house. These were facts that would now become part of a police report. By the time the sun had fully risen, Devin had been reunited with his mother at the police station. Karen called Michael an hour later. "He's okay," she said, and she was crying so hard he could barely understand her. "He's okay." He panicked. He said he was going to run away, catch a bus to his dad's place in Phoenix. "He went to your place because he remembered you had storage supplies, he thought he could find food, and he just sat in that pool house all night, trying to figure out what to do." "Karen. I know I was wrong," she interrupted, and her voice broke. "I know I was wrong about the pool thing. I know I defended him when I shouldn't have. I know I made him feel like he could do whatever he wanted and I'd just excuse it. But Michael, he's just a scared kid. He's scared and he made bad choices, and I'm the one who taught him that the world would just bend around him." Michael sat down on his couch. The exhaustion was setting in, the adrenaline fading, leaving him hollowed out. "It's okay," he said, not because it wasn't, but because Karen sounded like she was breaking, and he loved her, and they had been best friends for 20 years. "The police want to know if you're pressing charges," Karen said quietly. "For breaking and entering, or trespassing, or... I don't know. I don't know what the legal terms are. But Michael, if you press charges, it could go on his record. It could affect his future." Michael looked out at his backyard. At his pool, his carefully maintained sanctuary, that had been contaminated twice now, first deliberately, then desperately. He sat on his couch in the darkness, watching the security feed on his phone, checking and rechecking the footage from early that morning, watching Devin move through his yard like a phantom, watching his own panicked response, watching the police arrive. The footage was in high definition, clear and undeniable. Evidence. By Monday morning, he still hadn't decided whether to press charges. The DA's office called him on Monday afternoon. A prosecutor named Linda Sanchez. She explained that because of Devin's age and the circumstances, a missing persons case that had ended peacefully, a confused and scared teenager rather than a hardened criminal, the decision about charges was essentially Michael's to make. "He has no priors," Sanchez explained. "He didn't steal anything. He didn't damage your property. What he did was trespass, and he did that because he was in distress. We can pursue it, but honestly, I think diversion might be more appropriate. Counseling, maybe some community service, but not a criminal charge that follows him." "What about what happened before?" Michael asked. "The pool thing. Technically, that was also trespassing, charging for unauthorized use of private property. But without clear damages, without an actual loss beyond the principal, it's weak. And again, he's a minor. Michael understood what she was saying. He understood the law's perspective. He understood that the law didn't care about violations of sanctuary, about the feeling of your own space being turned into a marketplace, about betrayal and boundary violations that weren't quite criminal enough to matter legally. "I'll let you know," he told Sanchez. He called Karen that evening. They met at a coffee shop near the hospital, neutral ground, carefully chosen. "They're offering some kind of diversion program," Michael told her. "Counseling, community service, but no charges if he complies." "Are you going to take it?" Karen asked. She looked better than she had on Saturday, showered, dressed properly, her hair done, but her eyes were hollow. She'd aged in 48 hours. "I don't know." "Are you?" "Michael, he's my son. Of course I want him to stay out of the system. But this has to mean something. It can't just go away." They sat in silence. Around them, the Monday evening coffee shop buzz continued, people working on laptops, people meeting friends, normal life carrying on like Devin Mitchell hadn't tried to destroy everything, like Michael Torres hadn't had his sanctuary repeatedly violated. "I need to tell you something," Michael said finally. "And I need you to hear it, really hear it, not defend against it." Karen nodded. "I can't keep being friends with you the way we were. Not right now. Maybe not ever again. This thing with Devin, it's not just about the pool. It's about how you defended his behavior. It's about how you tried to protect him from consequences before you even knew what he'd done. It's about how you've raised him to believe that the world exists to accommodate him." Karen's face crumpled. "Michael. Let me finish," he said gently. "You're a good person. You're a good mother. But you're a good person who has taught her son that loyalty means never being honest about his mistakes. That love means excusing bad behavior. And I'm a good person who has finally realized that I can't be part of that system. So what are you saying? We're not friends anymore." "I'm saying I need space. I'm saying that I'm going to press charges." The words came out of his mouth and surprised him even as he said them. He hadn't consciously decided until that moment. But hearing himself say it, he knew it was true. "Michael, no. Please. If you press charges, it goes on his record, and he's only 16. He'll also learn that actions have consequences. He'll also learn that violating someone else's space isn't acceptable just because he's scared or angry or confused. He'll also learn that sorry isn't enough." Karen was crying now, ugly crying, the kind that doesn't care about appearances or composure. "I want to help him," Michael continued, and he was crying too, angry tears. "I want to be there for him. But I can't do that if I reward this behavior by looking the other way. That's not love, Karen. That's enabling. So you're punishing him. I'm making him face what he did." They left the coffee shop without resolving anything. Karen drove home to her son, and Michael drove home to his empty house and his pool that no longer felt like a sanctuary but like a battleground. That night, Michael spoke to the DA. He decided to press charges on the trespassing related to the pool business, the more recent incident where Devin had broken into the storage area. He decided not to press charges on the initial attempted break-in, that felt like piling on, but he wanted the system to take the recent events seriously. The case moved through the machinery of the legal system with the inevitable slowness of all such systems. Devin was processed as a juvenile. He was assigned a public defender. He was given counseling and community service as part of his diversion program, but with the addition of a formal charge of trespassing that would remain on his juvenile record. Michael received official notification that he was no longer considered in danger by Devin Mitchell. The case was classified as resolved. But resolution didn't feel like relief. 2 weeks after Devin's arrest, Michael ran into Karen at the grocery store. They were both in the produce section. They saw each other at the same moment, both turning to leave, both realizing that they couldn't possibly escape without acknowledging the other. "Hi," Karen said quietly. "Hi," Michael replied. "The trial is scheduled for next month. The lawyer says that if Devon accepts the terms of his diversion, there might not even be a trial. He might just accept the responsibility and move forward." "That's good," Michael said, and he meant it. "Are you going to be there? At the hearing?" Michael considered lying. Considered saying yes so she would feel better. Considered saying no because it was easier. "I don't know," he said, which was honest. Karen nodded. She looked like she wanted to say more, but words failed her. She reached out, as if to touch his arm, then pulled back. "I'm sorry," she said. "For all of it. For not listening to you about Devon. For defending him before knowing what he'd done. For being a human being with blind spots about your own child." A ghost of a smile crossed Karen's face. "Yeah. That. You're not the first parent to do that. You won't be the last." They parted ways in the produce section. Michael watched her move toward the checkout with her basket only half full, and he felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. But it was an acknowledgement that people you loved could hurt you without meaning to, could disappoint you, could betray your trust, and you could still care about them. It just meant things couldn't go back to the way they were. The hearing took place on a Wednesday afternoon in July, 3 months after the initial pool incident. The juvenile courtroom was smaller and less formal than Michael had expected. There was no jury, just a judge, a prosecutor, a public defender, Devon with his mother beside him, and Michael in the observation gallery. Devon looked older. Not in the way that growth spurts make someone older, but in the way that consequences age you. His face had lost some of the softness of earlier that year. His shoulders were tighter. The judge reviewed the case. The facts were presented. Devon's behavior, his family situation, his parents' divorce, his struggling grades, his general teenage anxiety, the circumstances of his actions, his compliance with his assigned counseling and community service hours. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge said, and Devon sat up straighter. "You've been assigned 40 hours of community service, which I see you've completed. You've been attending counseling sessions, which your therapist reports you've engaged with seriously. The charge of trespassing is being entered into your juvenile record, but pending your continued compliance and no additional incidents, it can be sealed when you turn 18. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Devon said. "What I want to know is, do you understand why you're here? Not the legal reasons. The real reasons. Why did you trespass on Mr. Torres's property?" There was a long silence. Michael watched Devon struggle with the question, watched his jaw work as he thought about what to say. "I was scared," Devon finally said. "I messed up with the pool thing, and my mom was mad, and I thought if I could just leave, if I could just get away, everything would stop feeling so wrong. And I knew Mr. Torres had stuff in his pool house, and I panicked, and I didn't think about the fact that I was doing something wrong again. I was just trying to escape." Did escaping help? No. It made it worse. The judge nodded. "The charges are being recorded. But Mr. Mitchell, you have an opportunity here. You have a chance to make better decisions going forward. Your mother loves you. Your community is willing to give you a second chance. What are you going to do with it?" "Be better," Devon said. "Not run away. Face things. See that you do." It was over. The gavel came down, the formality concluded, and Devon was released into his mother's custody with the weight of his record now officially attached to him. As people filed out, Karen caught Michael's eye. She gave him a small nod. He returned it. There was no reconciliation in that nod. But there was understanding. Michael left the courthouse and drove directly to his pool. It was 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, and there was no one there. Just the blue water, the tile deck, the cabana. He had maintained it obsessively over the past 3 months. It was pristine. It was isolated. It was his. He sat on one of the lounge chairs and realized that the sanctuary was gone. Not the pool was fine. But the idea that it was a sanctuary, a place separate from the world's complications, from other people's chaos, that was gone forever. Devon had taught him something useful, if harsh: there was no such thing as a completely private space. The world would always find a way in if there was a crack in your fence, if you left a gate unlocked, if you turned your back for long enough. Michael got up and dove into the pool. The water was warm, chlorinated, perfect. He swam laps, back and forth, until his muscles burned and his mind finally quieted. When he climbed out, he realized he was ready. Not to forgive Devon. Not to go back to the way things were with Karen. Not to pretend that trust, once broken, was ever quite the same again. But to move forward. To accept that people disappointed you. That parenthood was complicated. That friendship could withstand strain but might be permanently altered. That violation could happen in your own backyard, in your own space, in your own life, and you could survive it. Michael changed into dry clothes and went to his backyard to check his security cameras. 4 different angles, recording 24/7. He still needed them, he decided. He would probably always need them. Because the world had a way of testing your boundaries, and he wasn't going to be unprepared again. That evening, he received a text from Karen: "Thank you for coming today. I know it wasn't easy. I'm starting to understand some of what you've been saying. Devon and I are going to start family therapy. I think I need to learn how to be a better parent. How to say no. How to let him feel consequences. I don't know if we can be friends again, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm actually trying this time." Michael read the message 3 times before responding: "I appreciate that. Give it time. Maybe someday we can figure this out. But you're right, some things don't go back to the way they were. And maybe that's okay." He hit send and looked out at his pool in the evening light. The water was beautiful. The sunset was gold and pink and turning purple at the edges. The crickets were beginning their nightly song. Everything was peaceful, exactly as it had been before Devon came along, a full criminal operation in his own backyard.